We'll continue from one report from Eli Ochenberg to another one to look deeper into this issue and others. Eli Ochenberg, diplomatic correspondent for the News Today, had the opportunity to sit down with the UN's special envoy to the Middle East, Nickolay Miladenov. Here is an excerpt of the interview.
Mr. Miladenov, thank you very much for being here today. So just yesterday, we've seen the EU approving the labeling of products made in Israeli settlements, which triggered yet again the debate over Israel's image worldwide. Do you agree with the claims that Israel is being overjudged or unfairly judged by the international community, the UN included?
I think what the European Union did is part of what the policy in terms of consumer protection in Europe is, that people need to know the origins of the goods that they're buying. I understand that this has been taken very emotionally here in Israel, but I hope people will focus on what the real issue is. And the real issue today should be, what is it actually that the government, the Palestinian Authority, the people of Israel, the Palestinians can do to restart a political process that brings life back to the idea that you can have two states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace and security. And we should not get distracted by other issues, because this remains the fundamental goal of everybody in the international community, and I think from the majority of people, both Israelis and Palestinians.
Yes, we also hear rising voices claiming the UN has somewhat lost its relevance or amount of influence generally, and especially when it comes to Middle Eastern affairs. What role do you think you can play in reestablishing the UN's position here?
Well, I think with the role, we have a multitude of hats here in this region. And one hat, we work very closely with the Palestinian Authority on the entire developmental agenda, which is, over the last few years, taken a bit of a hit because of the lack of political progress. But we also play a very key role in mobilizing the international efforts to support a peace architecture that is necessary to bring the two sides together. And right now, that means that we, together with our partners in the United States, the Russians, the European Union, must advance the goal of seeing what it is that needs to change in terms of Israel's policies in the West Bank. How can we advance Palestinian unity so that both sides are in a better position to have meaningful negotiations about a two-state solution? Unfortunately, the reality that we face today is pretty grim. It is not just the security situation, which has deteriorated over the last few weeks, but it is the consistent lack of political progress and lack of political horizon that has angered many people, and that makes many people very skeptical as to whether a two-state solution is possible, particularly in the occupied Palestinian territories.
Well, we'll go back to this issue shortly, but do you intend to promote your predecessor's initiative, Robert Terry's initiative, to reach a truce between Israel and Hamas? Is this something on the agenda?
No, this is not on the agenda. What is on the agenda is our work with the Palestinian Authority in supporting their efforts to return back to a single government, if you wish, both in the occupied West Bank and in Gaza. I think that's in the interest of everybody. What we're trying to find is how to best support the reconstruction of Gaza, because the situation there is really, really desperate for people. They are stuck in between, a hammer and a hard place. They suffer because of the closures that have been imposed on Gaza, but they also suffer because of the limitations that have been put in place by Hamas. And we need to be able to return the legitimate Palestinian Authority to control the crossings into Gaza, because that would allow for more openings to happen, both on the Israeli and the Egyptian side, of course. But we also, for that, need to find a way of paying the salaries of about 40,000 civil servants in Gaza, civilian civil servants, most of them doctors and teachers, who have not been paid for over a year. So that is a whole package of our work that we have to continue focusing on. I believe very much that one of the most important tasks ahead of us will be to support the efforts of reconciliation and unity among the various Palestinian factions that are in the interest of peace on the Palestinian side, just as much as our work with the Israeli authorities and our international partners on making sure that we can find a meaningful way to return to negotiations.
Well, another common allegation towards the UN, besides Israeli claims, is that the UN somewhat shuts its eyes when comfortable, whether it's in regards to terror or human rights, with the recent example of Saudi Arabia being elected to chair the Human Rights Council. Do you understand such concerns that are rising towards the UN?
I find it fascinating how both Israelis and Palestinians alike love bashing the United Nations when it suits them and love praising it when it suits them. So we're quite used to that criticism. But the United Nations is a system that has different bodies. So what happens in the UN Human Rights Council, what happens in the Security Council, what happens in the General Assembly is the result of votes and of decisions that are taken by member states. I represent the Secretary General, and as such, I can assure you that our work here is very much focused on supporting peace, on supporting the resumption of meaningful negotiations between the two parties, and being fair on the basis of the guidelines that we have from the Security Council and from the various bodies within the United Nations. So sometimes, when necessary, we will speak against terrorism, but we will also speak when we see wrongs being done that inhibit the road to peace. For example, one of our consistent positions has been and continues to be that the expansion of settlements in the West Bank is an obstacle to peace. It doesn't help achieve peace. It doesn't help achieve a two-state solution. And most worryingly, over the last few weeks, it has increasingly become the cause of friction and anger with Palestinians because of the violence that has scaled up in relation to settlement expansion. So we will speak both against that, but we will also speak very clearly against terrorism when that is necessary, because nobody should live in fear. It doesn't matter if you're Israeli, if you're Palestinian, if you're European or American. Nobody should fear to take a bus ride, take their children to school. And that is something that we take a very, very firm view on.
Before you leave, briefly, after a few hectic, busy months in the job, is there room for optimism in the Middle East, in your opinion?
There is always room for optimism. And I think what we need to really dig deep down inside to find that optimism right now. But our job in the international community, in the United Nations, is not to give up hope, but to work with all parties to create hope. And today, the way we see this hope re-emerging is by pursuing a strategy that creates the conditions under which both parties find it meaningful to return back to a negotiated political process. Effectively, that means strengthening the unity within the Palestinian political movement, the Palestinian political establishment, but it also means substantial policy changes by Israel in how things are done on the ground. Policy changes that are consistent with the idea that at the end of this process, at the end of this road, there is a two-state solution. The government, the Prime Minister, has repeatedly reaffirmed his commitment to this perspective. We now need to see the actions that actually show that these policies are backed by, these words are backed by policies.
Mr. Nickolay Miladenov, the UN envoy to the Middle East, thank you.